Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Shrimp Tank. We're doing this virtually today. I'm your co-host, Ted Jenkin, here with my co-host, Lee Heisman. Of course, our guest we'll bring in just a second, Mark Silverman. He's a world-class author, podcaster. He's really helping leaders today that are overwhelmed, figuring out how to coach them so they can drive top-line revenue. And we love talking about that, Lee, every week right here on the Shrimp Tank. So many entrepreneurs that are out there that have to balance all these balls at one time, Lee. We always say they juggle them is really what they do. But on the Shrimp Tank every week, we like to bring you some of the brightest and best CEOs and entrepreneurs in and around the United States. We talk about this combination of book smarts and street smarts, and how do you start a business? How do you scale a business? And then maybe one day you're going to exit stage left and maybe you'll sell it for a lot of money. Who knows? As always, you can see every replay of the some 500 entrepreneurs that we've done here in Atlanta, the 1,000 plus that we've done across the country. Check out podcasts that we've done with Tony Horton from P90X, Brian Dawkins, Hall of Fame safety for the Philadelphia Eagles, and so many more entrepreneurs in blue collar and white collar businesses. And don't forget to go to the YouTube channel, Shrimp Tank Podcast. Just hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. Get all those great videos in your inbox. And you could always download us if you're in the car. Why bother listening to the radio? It doesn't help your business. Make sure you go to Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or anywhere around the internet. Lee, before we bring in Mark today, I'm just curious, since the timing of this today, do you have a prediction on the debt ceiling here and what's going to happen? Will they raise the debt ceiling, Lee, or not?
Well, Ted, I've always said this. It's quite intriguing. First, when you say the word prediction, I have to reference our age. And I think Mark might be a little younger. He looks younger than us. But whenever I hear the word prediction, I think of Rocky III, when they turn to Clubber Lang and they turn and say, what's your prediction for the Fight Club? Or for some reason, that's rung in my head for 30 years. And he looks into the camera with his mohawk and says, prediction is pain. And I'm not saying that pain is going to be the answer for the debt ceiling, but Ted, I always feel every time this comes around, and this is your area of expertise, it's like when you go to a concert and you're cheering and they come back for the encore and you're like, do I actually have to stand up? Do I actually have to cheer a little bit longer to get you come out and sing the song that you got popular for? So it seems a little old for me.
You know, it's just interesting to me because we don't really have a debt ceiling problem. We have a budget problem. And this is why the message to entrepreneurs is that when you run a business, we all know this, right? If your P&L is negative and you're going backwards, you either need to figure out how to raise revenue or cut expenses. It's not that complicated. Every entrepreneur that listens to this debate says it's not that complicated. We don't make cheeseburgers. You either have to raise taxes or you have to figure out how to cut expenses or do a combination of both. The rhetoric that we hear is it's fascinating to me because it's not that complicated. What are you going to tell most people at home? When you max out all your credit cards, the best strategy is take out another credit card. Nobody would give anybody sensible advice to do that whatsoever. So nonetheless, Lee, dollars to donuts, it gets down to the end, and then they raise the debt ceiling. That's what they're going to do.
Exactly. Well, speaking about advice, Ted, that you said, and talking about, do you give that advice to the government, let alone people that have credit cards? I think we have an expert on the show that his life is about giving advice, not only from his expertise, but also we talked a little, Mark, before about your background. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's just get one thing straight. I probably got a decade on both of you. So,
all right, fair. Well, you look darn good. And
I'm 60, so I'm sure I got a decade on both.
Oh, wow. All right. Less than a decade. We've broken the 50 plateau. But so first off, you look good. And I would normally say, Mark, you look good from a high quality of living and a high standard of living. But when you started to discuss your background with me before the show, you've had a lot of challenges. And that's probably what's allowed you to provide the coaching that you provide. Give us a background on yourself.
Yes, the way I like to describe it is, I was basically homeless and living in my truck. I was 135 pounds with really no prospect for life. And I came to DC because my brother owned a bunch of restaurants and he said he would lend me some money. And there was no Venmo back in 1989. Like you had to either go to the right Western Union or you had to go get money. So I came here and he helped me get sober, go to college. I was 27 years old and turn life around. So the reason that I like to share that, one is, I clean up really nicely. So when I'm in a suit and I'm on stage or I'm, someplace, people think that I came from a background of, upper middle class people, which I didn't, and that I had a college education and that I had all these advantages in life. And the truth is, I came from pretty bad deficit to overcome that, to become a short Jewish Tony Robbins, and become a millionaire, after all of that. But I also come at all of this at a different perspective, right? I live in status symbol land. I was just on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where the people are getting out of limousines to go into their apartments with their little dogs, and like everything you would think that place would be. And I feel comfortable in all places. I feel comfortable in poverty. I feel comfortable in those plaplaces. So it's a very different perspective that I bring to.
First of all, Lee, I think that may be our Halloween costumes next year. Short Jewish Tony Robbins. I think that would be good. We get that on Amazon. We might be able to get that cranked out. I wanted to ask you because in looking at your background and getting some insight into the books that you've published, I feel like it seems like some of the leadership you may provide is around this whole Stephen Covey, quad 1 or quad 2, that leaders are constantly putting out forest fires, and they're not focused on being effective in dealing with things that are urgent but not important yet. So, how do you frame out for the entrepreneur there about how to juggle the multitude of things that you have to do every day when you run a business?
I just did my Mastering Overwhelm workshop for a bunch of CEOs up in New York. It was a wonderful skyscraper overlooking the Empire State Building. And the thing that I tell them is all these things work. People have a Franklin planner, big rocks, little rocks. Every time management tool actually works. The problem is that we lie to ourselves, right? So I have ADHD. The reason I wrote my book, Only Tens, is because I have ADHD, and I had to figure out how to focus. When I became an entrepreneur, when I left the corporate world and became an entrepreneur as a coach, I had to figure out how to get stuff done. So I would write down my list of what I should get done, and I would prioritize, and I would do all this, and then it would all go to shit because I didn't keep my word to myself. I didn't keep my word to other people. I was all things to all people instead of for myself. So other people's priorities would take precedent. And what I learned is that it's an inside job. You can have all the tools in the world, and you can say what your priorities are, but if they're not really your priorities, if you're lying to yourself, so we call it a 10, right? So if something's a 10, it has to be done by you, has to be done by you today. There's very few things in the world that have to be done today, and have to be done by you. When you start looking, and I have them confront their to-do list. I said, we're going to be freaking ruthless about your to-do list and why things are on there. And I'll say, so what's on your list that was on your list yesterday, the day before, the week before, and you just keep moving it forward?
Right.
How are you lying to yourself that you're actually going to do it? Right? Or what are you avoiding about it? Let's look at why, like I avoid my taxes all the time. I avoid my expenses for speaking all the time. Because for me, with ADHD, a spreadsheet overwhelms me, right? Going into Concur and figuring out the airline ticket and all this stuff. So I'm teaching my assistant to do it. So, but now she waits for me to give her all the materials to put it in, because I hate that, right? So I show them that they're really lying to themselves about what they think they're going to do. Then I say, what should be delegated? And they're like, yeah, well, I understand delegation, but you know that you should delegate. But why don't you? So we have to go underneath of, where's the self-esteem that you need to have the difficult conversations of delegating, of setting boundaries, of saying, these are my priorities and I'm not going to work on other things, right? I had a client the other day who was going through a really, really hard time. And all my clients get 24/7 access to me. I work with some pretty successful executives, and real-time coaching is the best coaching when they're in a crisis. So sometimes personal crises come up. So I get up really early in the morning because I have, my morning routine kind of thing that I do. And I had a client who was texting. He texted me and he says, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. I can't sleep. I can't think. Can we talk? And he texted me at 5:15 when he knows I'm up. And I said, no. And he says, I thought you were up early. I said, yes, I get up at 5:15. I sit on my cushion. I meditate. I journal. Then I go down and exercise. And then I sit by the fish tank with a cup of coffee and with my partner, and we just spend 15 minutes together. Then we can talk.
I like that. Well, and that's
It's like,
and
how
Well,
hard
Mark,
is that to do when someone's paying you tons of money, right? You want them to like you. So you have to go underneath all the reasons, the self-esteem, the self-worth that you need in order to actually prioritize. Now, there's people on the other end of the spectrum who are tunnel vision on what's only them. And that's another set of problems.
Well, and that's my question, Mark. You're working with such high profile individuals, of course. You're influencing people that are not used to being influenced, right? These are the alphas in the room. With respect, I know a ton as you do as well. I'm usually running in these circles, and most alphas, most leaders in their respective fields or communities, they might say they're open minded, but they're used to their methodology, their patterns. And the path of least resistance is where people go. And like you said, I hate Excel spreadsheets. So you're going to try to avoid them and create an environment where you don't have to deal with them. When you have clients, and this is for our listeners out there, that say, I want to change, I want to become better. And the issue, as you said, is do they really want to change, or are they capable of it? Where's that transition where you realize you draw a line? I have clients paying me a lot of money and I have to set standards and lines here. How many clients have you lost by drawing those lines? Are you long-sighted versus short-sighted and said, I have to do everything everybody says? Where do you really broach that? I'm going to beat you up and you're not used to being beat up. That's what I have a sense you have to do.
I will tell you, I gain more clients by beating people up. I gain more clients by setting the line and by setting boundaries and asking a lot of them. People tend to step up than step down. I had one client who the CEO told him he had to work with me, and we had a chemistry call, and it was really wonderful. And I was totally in with working with him. So I go meet him in person. We go have a cup of coffee. And the first thing he says to me, he goes, "You're not going to change me. I just need some tips and tricks to be more productive." And I said, "Okay, fine." Now, knowing that I was not going to do that. Now, this is a guy who burned the candle at both ends, prided himself on being all things to all people. He worked until 2, 3 in the morning, then got up in the morning. He did everything himself. He didn't delegate anything because he was a control freak and he was the only one who could do it right.
Of course.
And he's like, "You are not going to change me."
So what was that evolution? Because right now, for listeners out there that are viewing this and or listening to this, you might pause for a moment and they could be on the edge of their seat going, well, I feel that way. What's wrong with that? How do you break through that? And how long did it take?
It took probably 3 or 4 weeks for the trust. But sometimes, like I have honesty Tourette's sometimes. So sometimes I'll say things and I'll say, so we've been working on this. I said, I don't think I can get you to be more productive because you can't work any harder than you do. And you're just one person. So we talked about, leveraging other people. We talked about we actually talked about his self-esteem. So again, I don't like to talk about time management. I like to talk about why you're overwhelming yourself and what are you running away from. So I'm like, so basically, dude, you really don't want to have a personal life because you're terrified of being alone. And he's like, what? I said, you need to be busy and you need to be a martyr and you need to be a victim of everything in order for you to feel important. And it took a couple weeks and he's like, fuck, I can't believe you said that to me.
Why, Mark, do leaders have such a hard time saying no? Why do they have such a hard time saying no to things?
Couple reasons. One is, to get successful, you need to say yes to everything. As an entrepreneur, every customer, you need to get revenue. Right. Then as you get to a certain level, you need to start to say no to everything because you really only need to be, you're now in a position where you only want your people and the right clients for you. So it's a habit, right? The other is like I can only really handle 10 clients at a time. And I have a waiting list. And this fall, I was up to 14 clients because I really liked the extra money to buy this and the extra money to and I'm like sneaking. And I'm like, holy mackerel, carrying 14 clients is a lot. Right. But I was just kind of seduced into, I loved having a fat bank account and thinking I could do all that. I think that's one. And then the other is absolute self-esteem. Like saying no, you have to have self-worth to say no. I am an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. That's a personality test. I'm the happy helper. I get my value from how much value I provide you. Right? I don't get my value intrinsically. It's you tell me how wonderful I am and I'm good. Now, if I do something for you and I go to the mat for you and you don't tell me how wonderful I am, I'm going to resent you. Right. So, but that's how I'm built. Right. So I had to learn to get my own self-esteem from who I am, to say no to people, to have the people who have been. So again, when you start to learn to set a boundary, three things happen, especially if you're all things to all people and kind of a people pleaser. And I know billionaires who are, people pleasers. But the first thing happens when you start setting boundaries is that people get, a lot of people get grumpy around you. There are people who have been used to using you for everything, and used to you being like, I have executives who, someone will give them the presentation that has to go to the board, and they'll stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning fixing it, instead of doing the accountability feedback loop of sending it back and saying, these are the changes I need to make. This is the standard, right? Who wants to do that? They'd rather hire Mark Silverman to do the coaching rather than do it themselves, right? So the people who are used to you being a doormat often leave. They don't want to be part of, and that's scary to a lot of people. They don't want to be part of you. Other people get a little grumbly, and they start to shift, and they start to respect you, and you start to have a better relationship. And then other people are like, I've been waiting for you to have a backbone, right? Then those have been your champion. The other thing I've watched is the 3 ways to set a boundary. Again, if you're a people pleaser, usually if a people pleaser will set a boundary after they've taken it, and then they can't take anymore, so they blow up and they just destroy the relationship. But they set a boundary with all kinds of anger and everything, and they feel good about themselves until they see the wreckage of what they did. And then, but as you start to learn this, and that was how I was. I had an ex-wife who knew how to ask for what she wanted all the time, and demanded stuff. And I was like, "You're so demanding." She's like, "You don't set boundaries. Like, it's your fault." She's like, "You could say no." I'm like, really? So
wait, did you hire her to work at your firm?
I did not.
Okay.
She and I could have never worked together. We're such good ex-spouses. We get along so well now. She actually calls me for help. But the second thing is, after that, is once you start getting used to setting boundaries, people do it apologetically. Look, I'd love to do that for you. I'd love to take that on, but I can't because of this and this and this. And it's really obsequious, and it's really kind of gross once you see that you're doing that. But it's a way to set boundary, and it's a way to not have the wreckage that the first part is. And then after a while, after you start to get the self-esteem, after you start to understand and doing your own work on why you're being a people pleaser, then you can set boundaries with love and care. I would love to do that for you. I can't, if you can wait till next week, happy to do that. Right. But, it's an evolution to be able to do that. But I think it all comes from self-worth and self-esteem. I think it all comes from childhood. Every bit of it comes from childhood trauma. People groan and roll their eyes when I start bringing up the fact that when you're in the boardroom, you're not a bunch of adults who shave and put on makeup and all that stuff. You're a bunch of 5-year-olds working out your problems in the middle of an executive boardroom. And once the person who figures that out is the one who has the power in the room. It's the one who can grow themselves up, see that everybody's just trying to handle their own fears, their own traumas, their own things in the interactions in business. And then they can unhook everybody else, and then they can have an adult conversation.
Mark, I have to ask one question, Ted. I must interject here. The way you're communicating, and our listeners are gaining a lot of information, and we're going to let them know how to get in touch with you after this show, of course, because I'm learning from you. But, a lot of CEOs in your position, a lot of very successful people, and Ted and I have been doing this for a long time, you tend to skip a lot of the headaches. I know you talked about your background and getting clean, which is wonderful personally. But from a professional perspective, hey, look, I've got it down pat. I'm Mark Silverman. Everything's easy to me. I just see the way it is. I meet clientele. No, but it's normal, Mark, right? You look where you are now. I meet clientele. I can figure you out in a second. I want to know, in this process of you starting your practice and starting this coaching, I need to know, what was a possible paradigm shift or an inflection point where you were doing something incorrect in your business and realizing, I'm making a lot of mistakes right now and I need to pivot to grow this successful?
Great. I talk about this on a lot of coaching podcasts because people have me on the, like how to grow a coaching business. And I was just talking to a young coach who wanted to be a coach. I'm like, dude, if you want to be a coach, do it like being a musician. I said, musicians should play music on the side on the weekends, right? In their home, and then they should have a job that pays, health insurance, right? And that kind of thing, because most people don't make it. So when I became a coach, I decided, I wanted to help people, right? I had my epiphany that corporate life and the way I interacted with corporate life destroyed me. And I was watching my contemporaries make tons of money and losing their marriages, tons of money, losing their health, tons of money going to Las Vegas and just doing stupid shit, right? And after I went through mine and had my epiphany on how things could be very, very different, I started my coaching practice, and I starved. I was taking care of my ex-wife and my children in their $1 million house. I was taking care of my elderly parents. I left a $500,000 a year job to become a coach. I remember my boss saying, "Are you making as much money now as you?" And I called him up. I'm like, "Dude, I'm making more money now." But I was starving, and I almost bankrupted myself. Because again, I couldn't adjust. Like, I like driving Mercedes and Lexus, and I forgot that I'm no longer an executive, a sales guy in the tech industry. I'm now a coach. But I wasn't charging enough. I had a lot of clients, but I wasn't charging because, again, remember that people pleaser thing. When I realized that I'm an Enneagram 2 and I get my value from people telling me I'm wonderful, I had a lot of people in the world saying how amazing Mark Silverman is. And I realized that was payment enough for me. Like, oh, they think I'm amazing. I'm fulfilled. I'm paid. And that did not pay my bank account. And I tell people, coaching is great, but coaching is becoming an entrepreneur. And I did not know that I was an entrepreneur with a P&L, my own American Express bills, and my own, like, Steve, can't really even forgetting his name. Anyway, so, basically that if you want a coaching business, you have to enjoy getting clients. You have to enjoy enrolling clients as much as you do coaching them. And that was a hard one for me, is that I had to enjoy being a businessman and an entrepreneur as much as I enjoyed coaching. When I made that shift, when I made the shift that people telling me how nice I am, or how many books I sell, or how many views I get on YouTube isn't going to pay my bills, everything changed. I went from being Oprah to being a professional executive coach, and my income went like this. I doubled my price. I have a waiting list for clients, but it was years of, why can't I make money? I don't understand why I can't. People tell me I'm the best coach in the world. Why can't I be successful at that? And it was because I wasn't treating my business as a business.
Would you talk about, for all entrepreneurs, you've done a multitude of marketing things. You've got, best-selling books, you've got a podcast that you run, you've got a YouTube channel. In today's modern age, the environment that we're in today, how important are any of these sleeves for an entrepreneur to get engaged in, even if they're ghostwriting a book? Is it important for them to do something to have their name out there?
I think it's different for everybody in every industry. For me, for being a one-on-one coach, I don't think I needed all that. I think it's helped. I think when someone's thinking of signing on with me and they see that my book is probably one of the best-selling self-published books around, I had no idea. A publisher for my next book is telling me it's unheard of to sell 75,000 copies of a book self-published. I thought I was a failure, right? And I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. But that they see that I have a book, that they see that I have a podcast, will help them pull the trigger. For me to scale now, though, it's to become a subject matter expert. And I'm trying. I want to move to one-to-many because I just can't trade. I'm old. I can't trade time for money the way I have been so much. So I'm trying to scale my business. So becoming, for me, Instagram's great. YouTube's fine. I have to be a subject matter expert on LinkedIn. So you see my face everywhere, only all the time. I'm so sick of myself, but I'm on, there's videos and I'll go to a supermarket and people are like, I watch your videos every single day. I'm like, yeah, I do. Who are you? Like, it's crazy the reach that these things have. I just had the president of a company that I worked for 20 years ago. I had him on my podcast about a year ago or 2 years ago. And he just sent me the bio that they put out to this talk that he's giving to this company. And it's my podcast. They took all the talking points from my podcast and suggested everybody listen to my podcast interview with him before he speaks to them. And he's, the reach to this is kind of crazy. And my coach, who's also a video coach, he says, you don't need to get 1,000 views on a video. You need to get one of the right view.
It's a valid point. I love that. That's, you know, I will tell you, Mark, that's the best thing is people always look as you know, and they say, oh, wow, look, you've done this. I've heard this for years. And so has Ted, where you got so lucky. I saw that good thing that you did, right? And I'm like, you didn't see the 99 bad things, right? No one sees the bad stuff. And I know, guys, you know, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Just a lot of juice from you. I gotta, Ted, run into our plead the fifth section here at the end.
Yes,
We've got to
yes.
plead the fifth with Mark because he's so transparent and open. I'm going to tee up our small little section, Mark, here. Plead the fifth. You get to plead the fifth one time if we ask a question that you're not allowed to answer, but I don't think that's going to happen to you. I've got an ask an easy one, which is if I were to ask at this juncture, not just your ex-wife, which you kind of mentioned it, but your children as well, what is the one thing that you would change about Mark? And I would ask them, what would it be? And would it be different for the children and your ex-wife? And are you married again, Mark?
So the one thing my ex-wife would change is I'm now married to a man. My kids love that because he grills steaks. We watch baseball and we got dogs and they're like, this is great. But she would change that. My children, I think my children would change the fact that I care about how I look and how they look. I have one son who's a Hasidic rabbi. With the long beard and I'm like, dude, you got a gay dad. You're going to put beard oil in that beard and your shirt's going to be freaking white. Like, honest to God, you
Oh
cannot.
my gosh.
And my other son drives a pickup truck, has guns and camo, and you know, like he's like, do I have to put a collared shirt on? Like, why do I have to put a collar? And he's a genius, so he doesn't have to. But he's, you know, the two of them are like, you know, why are you just so vain, Dad? I'm like, because I'm 60 years old and I'm on video everywhere.
Spectacular answer, Mark. Spectacular answer.
That was
Mark,
that was way too much.
I saw on your website there are so many different books that you recommend, obviously beyond yours, that leaders should read. But if I have a 4-hour plane flight or an 8-hour plane flight coming up, I'm flying internationally. Do you have one book that you would recommend as a great book to read?
Yes, Living Untethered by Michael Singer.
Living Untethered.
Yeah, and don't get he wrote a book called The Untethered Soul, which was a beautiful, just an exquisite book on the nature of reality, the nature of, you know, humanity. But it's a little hard to actually walk away with what to do with that. Living Untethered is his follow-up, and it is step by step. How do you get unhooked from the craziness of your business? How do you get unhooked from the craziness of politics, of the world? How do you get unhooked from the monkey mind that you have in your head? You know, the ancients say taming the human mind is like trying to tame a drunk monkey stung by a scorpion. This is thousands of years, right? Not just a monkey, not just a drunk monkey stung by a scorpion. So you're not going to fix this. Michael Singer talks about that. Now, I would, you know, you'd want to recommend business books and all this stuff and how-to books. But if you don't get underneath the crazy that you live with every day, you can be a billionaire and still live in hell.
And was it you said it was not The Untethered Soul, it was Beyond?
It's living untethered.
Living Untethered. Got it. I know why Ted's taking a trip. We're heading overseas, so I know that you're going to read that, Ted, there on the way.
I got a book to read on the plane now.
Spectacular.
It'll change. It's probably the most accessible spiritual self-help book I've ever read. And I've read hundreds and hundreds.
Ted, so if you want to, and my apologies, I know we're not in person, guys.
Can you ask me a hard question that I don't want to answer?
Go ahead, Ted, hit it, and then I know we can wrap up.
Have you ever had a celebrity client that you had to fire?
I've had clients that I've had to fire.
Yeah.
So no, I've not had a celebrity client who I've had to fire, but I have had to fire clients. Almost always that turns into them stepping up and doing what they need to do.
Oh, using the firing as a motivational piece. It's unintentional.
I did have a celebrity that I doubled their price. I said, you're too rich. Yeah, I said, you're too rich, too comfortable, beautiful girlfriend. You're too fucking lazy. So if we're going to continue doing this, I'm doubling your price.
Yeah, he needs to feel the pain. He needs to feel the pain, Mark, to actually action.
He absolutely, and I'm inside in my head, I'm going, what are you saying? Dude, what is wrong with you? How do you say these things to people? And he's like, you're right. You're so right.
Spectacular. Spectacular. So, Mark, listen, I'm keeping in touch with you. I know Ted is. I've got a book from you as well. How do people, Mark, that are listening or even watching, where do they go to find you? Where do they go to find you on the internet, which I know they could simply look you up, or even if they wanted to hire your services one day, just to speak or
MarkJSilverman.com. My website, MarkJSilverman.com. My podcast, The Rising Leader podcast, is there. My new program, the Rising Leader program, is going to be there. The new book will be out in June, the Rising Leader Handbook. We're shifting everything to helping fast rising leaders become really effective at what they do.
Yeah, folks, you got to check out the website, and I recommend signing up for the podcast as well. In the end, if they want to use you, they're going to have to get on a waiting list, but it may be worth it here, because if you're really serious about growing your business, Mark mentioned today about, knowing the things that you're good at, that you like to do, and doing more of them, and figuring out what you don't like to do and trying to get those off your plate, and trying to become a more effective leader, because as an entrepreneur, you wear all of these hats. You're in sales, you're the visionary, but without leadership, you're never going to be able to grow your organization the way that you could. So I wanted to thank you for taking time. I know that you were just on a junket and out on the road. Appreciate your time being on the Shrimp Tank this morning and sharing your wisdom with our entrepreneurs across the country. Definitely check out the MarkJSilverman.com website, the podcast, the book. He's coming out with the new one, The Rising Leader. He's got the Only Tens, that book you should check out as well. All these things give you as an entrepreneur nuggets of wisdom that can help you scale top line revenue, make your business more profitable, increase retention, and one day, hopefully put you in a position to exit stage left. Mark, thanks so much for coming on the Shrimp Tank today.
I love what you guys are doing. By the way, they can get a free copy of Only Tens on the website. But I've been listening to the podcast, and you guys are doing great stuff. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.